A continuación, tenemos el placer de presentar a la doctora Polyxeni Stylianou, Ministerio de Educación, Deporte y Juventud de Chipre, tanatóloga certificada y maestra de educación primaria en Chipre. Es formadora de profesores especializada en pedagogía de la pérdida y el duelo. Como asociada externa del Instituto Pedagógico de Chipre, ofrece seminarios para profesores y familias desde 2016. Su investigación se centra en la integración de los conceptos de pérdida y duelo en la educación.
Okay. I just want to say something about Damiano's performance. I'm not sure if I can find the words. However, I feel that my presentation is going to be a very, very easier than his performance here. So I'm already really calm. Okay. Excellent. And what about the language? Sí. So, officially, good afternoon, everybody. Buenas tardes. It is a great pleasure and honor to be here today to speak on a topic that holds deep significance for me. And first and foremost, I would like to express my gratitude to the conference committee, and in particular to Agustin and Pablo. Thank you both for the invitation to share my work and experiences with you. And I appreciate the presence of so many of you who recognize the importance of this, and I look forward to learning from your insights as well. Death education is often overlooked in teacher training, yet it plays a crucial role in our schools and communities, as we heard this morning. In my presentation, I will discuss the challenges teachers face even before making any effort to address lesson grief in the classroom, and explore the opportunities we have to empower them in navigating this sensitive yet essential topic. So, I would like to begin by sharing a personal experience that shaped my path in death education. It was September 2001. I had just completed my bachelor's degree in primary education at the University of Cyprus and had been appointed as a teacher in an urban public primary school. During my first week, I found myself teaching geography to a year 3 class, one that wasn't my own. After discussing their village, which I have marked it here on the map, I assigned the students a short paragraph as homework. Without much thought, I asked them to write something about their village. And I added, you might need your mom's help for information. Thank you. A student immediately responded, "My mom has died." And I remember looking at him in silence, feeling completely unprepared. I was relieved when the bell rang, saving me from having to respond. That empty moment marked the beginning of my journey into death education. Yet it wasn't until I pursued further studies in education and psychology in London that I fully realized I was heading in this direction. A module on counseling introduced me to the concept of death education, a term which I encountered for the first time. That session was a turning point. For the first time, I questioned my own attitudes toward death, loss, and grief, and I had the opportunity to reframe my own childhood loss experience. The need for death education in primary schools became clear to me. My doctoral research focused on integrating death education into the curriculum, giving me the voice and confidence to push for change in Cyprus. And fortunately, the Cyprus Pedagogical Institute, which is the official center for in-service teacher professional development in Cyprus, recognized this need. Since 2016, death education has been integrated into teacher training programs. And today, as a teacher trainer myself, I design and deliver seminars to help educators incorporate discussions on loss and grief into their classrooms. This journey has been challenging, yet deeply meaningful. I choose to begin with my personal story because it reflects the paradox of death education's simultaneous absence and presence in Cyprus. It highlights the urgent need to raise awareness of children's experiences with significant loss, the difficulties teachers face in addressing these topics, and an educational system that largely ignores both students' and educators' needs in this area. This lack of integration is not unique to Cyprus. Having studied various European curricula, I have observed that in many countries, death education remains absent from teacher professional development programs. And this gap makes this Congress, the first international conference on the pedagogy of death and the improvement of education, not just important, but necessary. Death education, or the pedagogy of death, provides a framework for discussing death, loss, and grief in the classroom. However, without proper training, many teachers avoid these discussions, missing valuable opportunities to help students process their experiences. In reality, death education is often present in schools through its absence. It is not only about what teachers say or do, it is also about what they do not say or do. Silence around death leaves children to navigate their grief and questions alone. Avoiding these discussions perpetuates a culture of death phobia, conditioning children to carry a death-avoidant perspective into adulthood. So, raising awareness about death education, its goals and necessity, is the primary focus of the seminars I offer annually as an external associate of the Cyprus Pedagogical Institute. These seminars are built on 3 pillars: theoretical foundations, practical tools for educators, and opportunities for reflective practice on death-related topics. The content changes each year to meet educators' needs. Many teachers attend after experiencing student loss firsthand, seeking guidance on how to support grieving students. Through this training, they realize that death education is not just about responding to loss when it happens, but also about preparing students for these realities in advance. And I will explore these aspects further in the main part of the presentation. So, Pablo Agustin and their colleagues have conducted excellent research on the challenges teachers face in addressing death education here in Spain, and their findings align closely with our experiences in Cyprus. I will briefly discuss 4 key barriers that keep death-related conversations out of classroom and schools. Why do teachers often avoid initiating discussions on loss and grief, or even continuing the discussion, the conversation, when a student raises the issue? First is the lack of training and resources. Most teachers receive little to no formal education on how to address death-related topics with students. And take the Cyprus University, for instance. Currently, for future teachers, there is only one course on grief offered by the psychology department titled Experiencing Grief, and it is optional. Future teachers can take it if they want to. And let me put this into perspective. When I graduated 25 years before, there was nothing. Now we have one optional course. Is that progress? Maybe, but it's certainly not enough. Secondly, many educators struggle with their own experiences and beliefs about loss, making it difficult for them to facilitate discussions about the subject. I have countless stories from colleagues who, while attending the seminar, have found themselves unexpectedly sharing their own experiences of grief and breaking down in tears. During my most recent seminar, which concluded this February, a kindergarten teacher shared something deeply personal. She told the group, essentially a room full of strangers, that this was the first time she had allowed herself to be vulnerable. She had experienced a profound personal loss, but was always expected to be the strong, the supportive one within her family and among her friends. And her last words to me were, "Thank you for helping me to break my snowball." Third comes the fear of saying the wrong thing. Teachers worry about causing emotional distress or handling grief incorrectly, so they often avoid the topic altogether. And let's be honest, a teacher's personal experience might lead them to say the wrong thing. And as educators, we are problem solvers. We correct math mistakes, grammar errors, and factual inaccuracies. We fix things, but grief is not something that can be fixed. Without a basic understanding of loss, we risk imposing our own meanings on death, on students' grief, rather than allowing them to find their own. Furthermore, even when we are ready and prepared to discuss these sensitive topics, we cannot prevent emotional reactions. And that's okay. Death and grief are not light topics. Students will feel sad. They may express their own grief or fears, and that is normal. What I always remind myself and other teachers is this: when someone cries, it is not because of the lesson, it is because they need to cry. It is not the discussion that brings these overwhelming emotions, it is death, grief, and loss themselves. And expressing those emotions is part of the process. Finally, one of the biggest barriers, institutional constraints. School policies and curricula rarely prioritize death education, leaving educators without structured support. It is always safer not to talk about sensitive issues, isn't it? If a school leader is unaware of the importance of death education, the unwritten rule often becomes better not to mention it at all. Over the past decade in Cyprus, we have worked hard to integrate discussions of loss and grief into the primary education curriculum, at least enough to give teachers some institutional backing. As a result, the words loss and grief now officially appear in the health education, religion, and literature curricula. But in practice, most teachers without proper training still avoid the subject. And that is the heart of the challenge. We can add words to the curriculum, but without training, without resources, and without cultural support, those words will remain just that, words. One of the biggest challenges we as educators faced when developing an death education training program in Cyprus was defining its content and evaluation. Since there was no existing framework for teachers' professional learning on death education, designing and implementing such a program posed several key challenges, including defining clear learning objectives, addressing teachers' personal biases, managing time constraints, encouraging program implementation, fostering trust and support, evaluating the program's effectiveness. And you see here the forthcoming book titled Perspectives on Death Education and Pedagogy of Death. In chapter 2, we explore these challenges and the strategies proposed to overcome them. Each of these aspects must be carefully navigated to ensure the program's success and relevance. But the greater challenge, of course, is how do we know what teachers need? And what if these needs change? How do we meet them? The answer is simple: we ask them. Not just through research, which provide a systematic, broader understanding of teachers' needs, but also in real time, adapting to what teachers require in each training session. It would be naive to claim that we meet teachers' needs 100%. But at the very least, we try. And we use entry and exit cards to see expectations and assess whether they have been met. These also help identify any lingering misunderstanding. So key questions for the training include: why are you here today? Ask at the beginning. And what will you take away from this? What else do you need? Ask at the end. Based on participants' responses, the feedback gathered throughout the program, and the final official evaluation by teachers each time, we shape the content of the training. Though it must be emphasized that this content remains a work in progress, as teachers' needs change over time and vary from person to person. Empowering teachers to incorporate death-related discussions into their classrooms requires integrating death education in their training, whether through pre-service programs or, at the very least, in-service training. Drawing on our 10 years of experience in training teachers on death education, this presentation is about the content of the seminar. And the title is the one you see here, Approaching the Concepts of Loss and Grief in the School Context. The seminar is built on 3 key pillars: a theoretical framework on death-related issues connected to death education, educational tools for implementing discussions on these concepts, and engagement through reflective practice to deepen understanding and personal connection to the topics. So, knowledge is power, of course. As mentioned earlier, teachers often attend death education seminars to better support grieving children. The in-service training focus on framing and reframing loss and grief through interdisciplinary lenses, including philosophy, psychology, religion, sociology, and pedagogy. The seminar explores ethical dilemmas, creative ways to address death, and theoretical perspectives ranging from ancient Greek philosophy to modern thinkers. Psychological models such as Straub and Schatz's dual process model provide insight into grief responses. Moreover, referencing research from Cyprus, where local studies on death education are both rare and particularly relevant, demonstrates how such education enhances children's understanding of grief and peer support with this specific cultural context. The program encourages teachers to reflect on their own attitudes toward death, loss, and grief, with a particular focus on the Greek word penthos and the psychological, philosophical, and cultural aspects of grief. I insist on using Greek terms here because language holds great value when discussing these concepts. Also, because loss is a process rather than something to overcome, a notion once widely accepted and still falsely reinforced in phrases like, "you will get over it." Grief is not an illness to be cured or a challenge to be conquered. It is an experience to be lived. Similarly, the goal is not to detach from the deceased, but to continue the relationship in a way that remains meaningful. Additionally, I avoid the term reaction to grief, antidrasi in Greek, as it contains drasi, action, implying an active response. Instead, I prefer using the words response or expression of grief, ekdílosi, as grief may sometimes manifest without visible action. Another example of language's power is shaping grief support in the phrase, "you are strong," often intended as encouragement, but inadvertently denying the griever permission to be vulnerable. Such well-intended words can make the grieving process even more challenging. The program emphasizes that there is no one-size-fits-all approach. Teachers are encouraged to engage with theories that resonate with their cultural beliefs and teaching context, while also being challenged to question their personal views. This ensures that they remain open-minded and receptive to the diverse ways in which individuals experience grief. Secondly, comes the question how. As teachers become familiar with the theoretical framework of death education, they often ask how to apply it in their classrooms. Implementing death education can be challenging, and accessible resources are key to supporting teachers in this process. In the first couple of years, I used small-scale scenarios. However, I found out that this limited children's personal expressions. To overcome this, children's literature became central, offering a familiar and safe way to explore grief. And why is children's literature familiar? We teachers all know that we feel comfortable with this. And secondly, it provides opportunities for children to engage with real-life situations in a non-threatening way. Through children's literature, teachers can discuss how the main characters of a story react to and process to, comparing these fictional experiences with their own responses. Additionally, such books highlight the support given to grieving characters, providing space for children to discuss personal questions or, if they wish, share their own experiences, fears, and concerns. Although I frequently add new books to my grief-related reading list, 4 children's books form the core of the death education seminars. Goodbye Mausie by Robbie Harris clearly presents the emotions of a child experiences after the death of a pet, including denial, anger, sadness, and acceptance. The second one is No Matter What by Debbie Gliori, which conveys the idea that love remains constant and never dies, regardless of what happens. The third one, Je laissais mon âme au vent, I Left My Soul to the Wind. It's an illustrated poem by Roxane Marie Gallier, emphasizes the enduring nature of memories and how relationships with the deceased change but are not lost. And the last one, Words on Waves, written by Greek Cypriot author Elena Perikleous in 2019 and published by the Cyprus Pedagogical Institute to introduce death education in primary schools, is particularly significant. And this book is available online in English for free via the QR code provided here, where you can also find a proposed lesson plan on its implementation. This book consists of 3 letters written by a grieving boy to his deceased grandfather in the form of a diary describing his experience of loss and grief. All these lessons emphasize the importance of respecting each grieving person's individuality and relationship with the deceased, reinforcing the idea that grief is deeply personal. Beyond books, the how question is also addressed through films. Short films in particular are highly manageable and often resonate deeply with children. Some of the films are the ones you see here. Laila, a short film by Carlos Toscano. I think he's Spanish. Both of this is about a strong emotional narrative. We all know The Lion King, I don't know about The Good Dinosaur, both of which depict themes of loss and resilience. And films suggested by seminar participants, such as If Anything Happens, I Love You, and Canvas. The first one is about the grief of parents after their daughter is killed in a school shooting, with her final text message to them reading, If Anything Happens, I Love You. And Canvas is a story about a grieving grandfather who struggles to reclaim his passion for painting after a loss. The last one, a particular meaningful short film for us in Cyprus is Omicron Plus. It is a 12-minute film about the grief of Greek Cypriot refugees following the Turkish invasion of the island in 1974. And you can watch the film here via the QR code provided, if you like. There are subtitles. In this film, grief extends beyond death to include all forms of loss brought by war and displacement. The goal is not only to acknowledge our own grief as Cypriots, a grief that still remains, but also to cultivate an understanding of the grief experienced by today's refugees, whose numbers, unfortunately, continue to rise. Reflective practice is essential for teachers' development, especially when addressing sensitive topics like loss and grief. And in the seminars, teachers are encouraged to actively reflect on their learning and experiences, exploring their personal boundaries, strengths, and vulnerabilities. For example, brainstorming grief-related concepts with colleagues fosters diverse perspectives, while engaging with children's books on grief allows teachers to experience the lessons as learners themselves. Reflection also extends to personal grief, with teachers invited to participate in non-verbal activities such as drawing or crafting to express their emotions. The success of this professional learning program lies in creating a safe space where teachers can explore their feelings and develop the skills needed to support their students. Through reflective practice, teachers can integrate deaf education into their classrooms, fostering both personal and professional growth. And again, I would like to emphasize that the three pillars of this program, the theoretical framework, pedagogical tools, and reflection, form a holistic approach to professional development. However, these pillars are not separate, sequential steps. We do not begin with theory, then move on to tools, and finally to reflection. Instead, they are interconnected and continuously interact throughout the learning process. And before concluding my presentation, I would like to share some examples of activities I use to illustrate this integrated approach. This, I call it the undo activity. We begin by addressing change and its inevitability through the use of plasticine. As an ice-breaking activity, I give participants plasticine in different colors and ask them to mix at least 2 colors together to create something they like or that represents them in some way. They then present their creations to the group, explaining why they made them. This serves as an introduction to the team, but then I ask them to unmix the colors and restore them to their original state, an impossible task, of course. This leads into a discussion about change in life. Another example is mandala. Before discussing the components of grief, we start with a mandala activity that encourages vulnerability and opens the conversation about the different ways grief is experienced. What does this involve? I ask the participants to recall a loss they have experienced without necessarily sharing this experience, and write down some emotions or thoughts associated with it. They then assign a color to each emotion and use these colors to fill in a mandala, giving the most intense emotion the largest space. These are some of the results of various workshops and with teachers and students at school. A significant aspect of this activity is the sharing that follows. Each mandala is unique, with different colors representing even the same or similar emotions and thoughts. The mandala activity helps explore the main aspects of deaf education, which is, in my opinion, vulnerability. However, according to Freud, out of our vulnerabilities will come our strengths, our resilience. To introduce resilience as such, we use this activity, the first aid kit activity. I ask participants to think of a significant loss and write down, draw, or attach a photo of what they did that helped them cope with it, what others did that helped them, and what might have helped them further. In this way, they create their own first aid kit for wounds that are not physical and may not always be visible. And speaking about wounds and scars, here comes the scar. I'm sure you all know it. To discuss healthy ways of grieving, the Lessons from Lions by Greg Adams is particularly useful, and I highly recommend his work for both teachers training and classroom discussion. You can access it for free online. So here, the Lion King story illustrates 3 common yet ultimately unhelpful reactions to loss: running away from the pain, the problem, and those who care about you, pretending the loss never happened, acting as if the past doesn't matter, Hakuna Matata, and treating grief as a secret, never talking about it. And what about this book? Do you know it? This called Si Pariso is by Spanish writer Marta San Mamé. And from a pedagogical perspective, we emphasize, with the help of this book, the importance of using direct rather than metaphorical language when talking to children about loss. This story highlights how grief and change are universal human experiences, and the key message is that grief is not about being strong, and that the dead are not up in the clouds, asleep, or on a long journey. They have died, and that's okay, because death does not necessarily mean they are forgotten. As the book states, that which dies is never forgotten, and that which is forgotten dies. Blackout poetry. Yeah. In the last 2 years, I have expanded my seminars to include secondary education teachers as well. However, due to time constraints, covering different age-appropriate books can be challenging. I found that this activity, the blackout poetry, is very useful in introducing multiple books. And for those who are not familiar with this technique, I'm going to explain very briefly here. I present approximately 10 books, depending on the audience, that I believe will be useful for their students. From each book, I select a passage and print it separately. Each teacher chooses the book and the passage that resonates somehow with them, reads it privately, and then blacks out most of the words, leaving behind only those that hold meaning for them. They then read their edited text aloud to the group, and the result is a deeply personal poem, uniquely shaped by their individual perspective. We have also recently incorporated photo voice as a pedagogical tool. A pilot study recently published here, you can find the reference. This pilot study demonstrates that photo voice is an effective way to explore loss and grief. Its strength lies in its flexibility, allowing teachers and students to shape its focus. And here I put 2 examples of photographs teachers have used to discuss death, loss, and grief. The first one is about the picture of the house you see on your left. No, on your right. No, on your left, sorry. And I'm going to read an abstract of this teacher's reflection. She wrote, It's of my parents' house, which is next to mine, and has remained uninhabited and closed for the past 2 years. Since my parents passed away, the emptiness and stillness inside deeply saddened me. The house remains exactly as it was, with all its belongings untouched. I can't bring myself to move anything. The closed doors and windows constantly remind me of the loss of my loved ones. Once the house was full of life, daily gatherings with family, siblings, grandchildren, and neighbors. There was a comforting noise, an atmosphere of warmth you could always expect, and now the silence and complete emptiness frees my heart. And here it's an example of disenfranchised grief. I don't know how is the translation, but it means the grief that is not widely recognized or validated by society. And for the right 3 pictures of the Beetle, we have a poetic perspective on death. This colleague wrote, To me, is just a photo of a small, insignificant insect. What is death like when it's close to me? What is death like when it's far from me? It's one thing to lose what's close to you and another to lose what's far away. We are currently researching this area with teachers using pre- and post-seminar photographs. While we are still in these early stages, I anticipate that this study will lead to a poetic collection, balancing both serious and light-hearted reflections. This research will also focus on the language teachers use, an area that presents unique challenges. Photo voice activities can also work with given pictures, and the photos you have seen throughout my presentation are my own photos. It's a collection I have made to introduce and engage with photo voice. All these activities serve a dual purpose. They provide a theoretical framework for deaf education, while also offering practical pedagogical tools for discussing deaf-related topics in classrooms. At the same time, they create opportunities for reflection, allowing educators to explore their own perspectives on grief and loss. I began this presentation with a story, one that marked the beginning of my journey into deaf education. A moment of silence, an unspoken question, and my own unpreparedness. That moment stayed with me, shaping the path I followed. And here we are today, in a room with educators, researchers, and advocates, all recognizing that death, grief, and loss are part of life, and therefore must be part of education. The past cannot be rewritten, but the future is ours to shape. Imagine a future where no teacher feels as unprepared as I once did, where death is not a taboo, but a conversation we guide children through with honesty, empathy, and care. Education has the power to transform how we, as a society, approach death. The more we talk, the more we learn, and the more we learn, the more we empower others. We do this not just for our students, but for ourselves too, and for the generations to come. So, as I close today, I leave you with this question. What will you take with you from this discussion? And more importantly, how will you use it? Whether as teachers, researchers, or policymakers, we each have a role in breaking the silence around death in education. Change begins with small steps, of course, and today we have already taken one by being here. More importantly, we recognize the need and the value of keeping this conversation open, and we see the river and we build the bridge. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your responses.
Vamos a abrir un turnito de preguntas de 15 minutos aproximadamente. Y nada, podéis preguntar en español o en inglés, y nuestras traductoras maravillosas, las preguntas que sean en cualquier idioma, bueno, sobre todo en español, se las traducirán a ella, lógicamente. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much for your preparation and stories. My name's David Sunderland, and I worked for the United Nations in the field of HIV and AIDS, including for UNESCO. And when I think about death education, I think it's very similar to comprehensive sexuality education in terms of the taboo, but also it's much more advanced, it seems to me, than death education. There's an international guide that's been in place for 20 years, which includes detailed information, including, for example, on the 5 stages of childhood and the different messages that might be presented. I'd be interested in your experience in Cyprus, in how the two inform each other, if that's the case, because often they will fall under the heading of life education, but I imagine that's often not the case. So would be interested in your response.
I didn't catch the last one about the life education.
Yeah, so life education is often used as a catch-all heading, which may cover sex education, may cover death education. I'm just interested in the Cypriot experience in this regard.
Thank you for the question and your response. It's the truth that sex education and death education go together in the literature as well. And there is an anecdotal phrase I really like, that they say that sex education is not for everybody, but death is, sorry, not about education. The education is for everybody. Sex is not for everybody, but death is. What we have in Cyprus now. Both sex education and death education are integrated in the health education curricula, but I'm a little bit hesitated to say a lot of things because we are just taking some very, very small steps. I think that, I have the feeling that death education might be easier to introduce in Cyprus culture than sex education, about which we have already these days a lot of negative reactions, let's say, some very strong concerns against, or who is going to give the sex education. But nobody, I think we take advantage of the fact that death is horrifying us. So we didn't have any negative reactions. However, the steps are really, really very small. While I was doing this research for the first time, that goes back 13, 15 years from now, we are really very careful and worried about parents' reaction. However, it ended up when we asked the parents in the class to talk about the project we ran with their children. Unexpectedly, surprising was that they were very curious on death education as such for them. I mean, I was expecting them to ask questions about the lessons and how students react, and we ended up answering questions on grief and loss and the experience. And I have this feeling that today parents, they need this discussion, and in many cases they referred that they had the opportunity after a lesson in the class to talk with their children about their own philosophy or religion beliefs regarding death and loss and all this stuff. So I have the feeling that death education is gonna be easier than sex education. We are still running to become a cultural, I mean, we have it in the curricula, but it's not working the way we would like to work yet. Everything was clear. I was thinking, and I'm going to ask one question myself. I'm going to ask the question. If you are using any of these techniques, I mean, they're not something that they came out of the blue. I mean, there are techniques we use at schools. If you use some of these techniques, or do you use the children's literature to introduce these subjects?
Bueno,
Just to think about it.
ya.
Yes, please.
Bueno, buenas tardes y muchas gracias por tu intervención. Estoy gratamente sorprendida del paralelismo del trabajo que tú has mostrado con el trabajo que hemos realizado aquí, bueno, a través de la Autónoma, y yo trabajo en la Comunidad Valenciana.
She is very grateful about your presentation. She can see the resemblance with the research that they are also doing at the University of Valencia.
Mi tesis doctoral fue sobre el cine utilizado para la formación de profesores, y utilizamos películas adecuadas para cada edad, desde los 3 años hasta ciclo formativo.
Her dissertation had to do with using films, in different stages, from 3 till ¿hasta qué edad?
Ciclo formativo.
Till
Adult.
and to train teachers in the use of them.
Y transcribiendo las respuestas de los estudiantes, de los niños hasta los adultos, y luego analizándolas. Hemos utilizado también la literatura infantil y de alguna manera en nuestros estudios hemos comparado la educación sexual con la educación para la muerte.
Collecting the narratives from the different ages, and by studying them, they have seen the comparative between death and
Sex education.
Sex education, yeah.
Entonces estoy sorprendida y contenta de que en Chipre se haya ido realizando así. También hay un cambio. Para mí también son unos 25 años trabajando en el tema, y he podido ver esa evolución, no tan rápida como nos gustaría, pero sí evolución.
Just like she's been for the last 25 years doing this work, hoping that it could go faster, but there's some progress.
Y creo que sí que ahora hay un campo abonado tanto en las familias como el profesorado, que están demandando en estos momentos y que ven de una manera positiva esa educación para el duelo y la muerte en sus hijos, ¿no?
And that somehow now there's a fertile field where families can see the importance of working grief and talking about it and doing something about it with their kids, with their children.
Y bueno, era compartir esto, ¿no? Es como una alegría que en Chipre se esté haciendo algo así. Y también, pues no sé, invitar si hay otros países en los que se esté realizando este tipo de formación al profesorado, introducción de la pedagogía de la muerte en las escuelas, pues bueno, que nos lo demos a conocer, y creo que este congreso está permitiendo eso, ¿no? Ese intercambio. Muchas gracias.
So she's grateful and so pleased to see that in your country and other countries they are also working with the pedagogy of death, and hoping, like with this Congress, that they can altogether keep on working on it.
Yeah, thank you very much for all the comments. And the truth is that we have more power if we are united, because we are not many people in each country, but networking makes this effort more serious to be seen. And I believe that the pandemic helped death education a lot to this direction, because parents and the society realize the importance of grief-related discussions. And I must add here that through the Cyprus Pedagogical Institute, we also have seminars for parents as well. And if a school wants to make a change, usually they ask us when there is an issue. But they have the opportunity to ask for seminars for teachers to integrate some lessons with children, and for parents as well. So it's a holistic approach, and it should be. Thank you for your comments.
Hi, I'm Karen Murris. I'm from a university of Oulu in Finland, but also University of Cape Town in South Africa. And your question is about people having used children's literature. And I've been sort of busy with especially philosophy with picture books, philosophy with children for the last, I don't know, my entire life, which is a long time. So probably about 40 years. And I recognize a lot of the picture books that you've shown. I'm really excited about that. Just a few comments. And I think that the way I've been working is very much philosophizing with children, and I can see that you're familiar with that idea, so that the questions come from the children. And I think it's sad if we start to think about death education, like, again, environmental education and sex education and health education, that we have to all keep it separate, because what we find is that we not look for books that have the right theme. So there was something about, do we only have to talk about death when it's because someone loses something or someone or an insect? And I think that's in particular important in the Anthropocene and climate change and wars, and that when these discussions, inquiries come up, that how do we prepare teachers for that, rather than saying, oh, we do this when it's sex education or it is death education. I think it would be really sad if it goes that way, because what I find is that children have no problems with it at all, but that it tends to be, and I don't want to generalize about that, because sometimes children do. So if you use a pedagogy where there are ways, and I love what you were saying about children's literature offers the opportunity through the characters to find some kind of way of distancing. And children are very resilient and capable of protecting themselves, I have found. It is usually adults and teachers who are the problem. So my question to you would be, in your teacher education program, what do you do about that when teachers are not in a situation where they know the answer to children's questions? They get very uncomfortable. That has been, for me, the biggest challenge. And I've also written about that quite a bit. And just to say hello from Renske Visser, if you know her.
Yeah, I do. Thank you.
She's with me in Oulu.
Okay. Thank you very much for this comment. It's a lot of things that can be said. I totally agree with you that it should not be a separate lesson. However, unless we put it somewhere in the curriculum, even in the health education or through literature, we don't have a way to talk about it. But what we insist is that death-related issues, they are not only in literature. You can find them in physics, in mathematics, when we're talking about how long does a dog live, for example. We're talking about death, actually, or about possibilities. The possibility to die is one. It's a difficult possibility in mathematics. And in other subjects as well. So we encourage to introduce these issues in the class when they come, not just talking for 40 or 80 minutes. Not to ignore them. But I feel that we need to have some lessons made for this, and then we can go here and there in the literature. What a colleague in Cyprus did, it's a unit on children's literature unit, where he put together some abstracts from different books that the theme is about children that lose their parents, for example. But they don't talk about it. They talk about it literal, I mean what the literature says. So it's a part of the question, it's a part of the discussion, but not the question. And about the last question, the questions that sometimes children ask us, but we don't know the answer, like what happens after we die, where do we go? My colleagues always ask this question, and I have the answer. I tell them, if you know, tell them, and tell us too, to underline that there are questions that they're existential questions. We don't know for sure, and we don't know at all. But it's okay and honest to say, I don't know. Because I have the feeling that if children, this is happening really rarely, not very often. When children ask the question, they are not waiting for an answer. They just want to ask the question. I have this feeling. But if they ask, we say, we don't know. Okay, and then we have the religion perspective, with some colleagues say, but we do know. Our religion says this and that. And I say, this is your religion, and my children, my own children, might not belong to this. So as teachers, we really need to be aware that our answers to these existential questions are not the answers that the family gives to the children. So it's the family's responsibility to answer the questions. But we can be honest. And if the child insists, that happens very rarely, you can say your own opinion, but in a way that this is not the one and only. This is what we do. But when you answer, I don't know, it's accepted most of the times. Did I answer all the questions? I don't remember. Is it okay?
There were many, yeah, but
we talk later about literature, and it's okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Xenia, for this overall impressive presentation. We are friends, so
that's why he's saying
I will talk to my friend as a friend, but I did learn quite a lot of things from this presentation, and thank you for this. I do understand the need to, introduce a specific lesson about loss and grief and what we call death education. However, I think, and I do agree with what the former said, that we're not going to be very successful if we isolate this topic from the overall effort to address the needs and the well-being of students. So my own approach, I don't specialize in the matter, but I do offer my own seminary on loss through film in Cyprus as well, is that when I have the students, asking several questions, and I teach, I'm an IT teacher, I am a mathematician, and I wanted to attend because I'm out of curiosity, but I don't know if this is useful to me at all. My answer is, as a teacher, it might not be very useful in terms of teaching your own subject, but from a pastoral point of view, when a student comes to you with several questions, you have to be prepared to give them some sort of answers, or at least recommend a few resources, a film, a book, so from a pastoral point of view, we should not underestimate this aspect. So I would like to have your own take on this. The pastoral aspect that touches upon many different teachers from many different areas. And I do think, and that's my second point, which is quite relevant, but not not quite the same, that integrating the discussion about loss and death to almost every single subject, both in primary and secondary education, is the ideal, I think.
Yeah.
Because I do think a mathematician can do something about this when talking about loss. You know, we talked about statistics so much during the pandemic in a way that made it so inhumane in the end. People became numbers, you know? So everyone has something to say about it. Yes.
Yeah, I totally agree about this. It's not a matter of the subject we teach, it's about the work we do with children. We are teachers, no matter what the subject is. And in the seminars now, while opening in the secondary education, many, I mean, not only, they are different from different directions that they come. I think the main point and the reason why teachers attend these seminars is first for themselves, personally, and secondly for their professional development. I have this feeling. But the personal development helps their professional development and how they discuss this issue with their students. It's very important to know what to say, but more important to know what not to say. Yeah. Thank you very much.